Good morning, everyone. For the second time, actually, I gave the whole stream. I'd clicked the go live button in YouTube Studio. It said it was going live. Did the whole stream. Went to go end the stream, and it said going live now, and it finally finished going live. So I have 16 seconds of recorded end. Oh, so disappointing. Anyway, it's nice. I got practice in, and I got to make myself a cup of tea. So let's get started. All right. Good morning. Welcome to a marine layer, foggy Santa Cruz this morning. Hence the reason I'm not brightly illuminated. But now I've got tea. Oh, and it's too hot. I can't drink it. It's a decaf Earl Grey. It's really good. The company is what is it? Harney and Sons. You can buy a whole box of it. So I think for me, Harney and Sons Earl Grey, especially if you don't put milk in your tea, is the best decaf tea. Both Earl Grey and their regular black tea. Highly recommend it. Harney and Sons. I find it on Amazon. I'm sure you can buy it in lots of other places, but I'll put the Amazon link in the show notes to the decaf teas I drink. I can't drink too much caffeine. If I drink like a full cup of coffee, I get like pain shooting down my left arm and stuff. I'm highly sensitive to caffeine. All right. With that out of the way around the tea, today we're going to cover the Django developer site. Hold on just one sec, please. I got to redo my slide deck. I forgot to get it all the way back. Okay. So let's go to the slides. Boop. There we go. The slide deck. All right. So remember, one quick reminder. This is the Kickass curve. And our job in developer relations, or if you just want developers to like you and want to use your stuff and talk about how awesome your stuff is you want to get developers from this under the suck threshold when they're first getting started up to this above the Kickass threshold as quickly as possible, as nicely as possible. Developers are doers. The more you help them do and kick ass, the more they're going to love you. And that's as simple as it is, right? And so that's what we're trying to aim for, especially with our documentation sites, and then helping them once they get up to the Kickass area, right? But once developers get up here, they become pretty self-sufficient. They know exactly which doc to go to. They know the libraries they want to use, all that stuff. And your doc becomes important, but it doesn't have to guide them as much. All right. So today we're covering the Django site. So there's the djangoproject.com. Let's go ahead and look at that site. We've got another browser over here, so we'll open it here. All right. So right off the bat, you can see they do a really nice job. Still, I don't like they wasted space here, but I do like that they have a nice quick summary. Makes you build better web apps more quickly with less code, which is true. And they have the nice getting started with Django. Oh, a little bit of background though. Why I'm covering Django. So Kat on my team has done a lot of web development, but not server-side development. And if you're going to work with Postgres, you got to learn server-side development. And I'm wearing my PyCon shirt from 2016. I love the Python community. I loved them online before. Or I liked them, I should say. After going to PyCon, though, I loved them. One of the friendliest shows. Really, everybody. It's just one of the friendliest, nicest communities, developer communities you can deal with. Very little snottiness. Really, everybody kind of pitching in together. Like making the bags for the show that they give out. The day before the main registration, it's a volunteer activity. Like everybody gets in line, goes through line and stuffs the bags and makes all the bags. It was like and I had a great time doing it, like talking to people, meeting people. It's just a great show. If you can ever, once we're, in a couple 100 years, once this plague is over, or pandemic, I should say, once this pandemic is over, you should definitely try to go to a PyCon. I've never been to a Django Con, but now that I've been using Django a lot more, I'm definitely going to try to go to a Django Con. So anyway, I'd never used Django. I'd mostly used Flask for my Python development. I'm kind of a lightweight kind of guy and believe you should just write REST services. But Kat needed to learn some server-side development, and I figured everybody talks about Django. Django's big with Postgres. Let's get you started with Django. And so she and I started learning Django together. And so that's the background. So you can see they got a nice get started with Django right at the very beginning, right? Before I go dig in on this, I'm going to actually cover a few more points on my slides. Let's go to, where did my slides go? Oh, they're right over here. Right. So the points, we're going to cover the summary beforehand, and then we'll show some, and then we'll come back and cover them at the end. And we'll keep it quick. Okay. So overall, Django Site is exempt, should be one of your driving examples as to what a developer site should look like and be. It is, Kat can testify if you ever contact Kat. As we're going through it, I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is so good. See how they do this? Look at this. This is exactly what a developer site should do. And you know what's even more astounding to me, kind of, when I think about it, is that this is a volunteer site. It's an open source site. There's no product here, right? This is a developer community that has built this themselves. There's no, they might have a dedicated doc team, and whoever it is, hats off to you. But their doc is just, it's a thing of beauty. And I'll show, we'll talk about how it's beautiful later. It isn't, but if you are looking for a site, like what is a good developer site, the Django site is it. Okay. Use that. I used to say things like Lucene or Poi, which is a Java library for working with Excel and doc files, especially the binary format. I really liked those when I was getting started, but those are kind of old and I haven't looked at them in a while. And really now I'm going to be pointing people to the Django site. I still have some critiques. Don't worry. You know, I got some. I'm going to be fair and try to be balanced. But really exemplary site overall. Pretty good tutorial, though it doesn't hit some of the common use cases. And actually, I'll show you a site that does a better job, I think, of the tutorial, which was surprising to me that they had it. I keep forgetting them, but I'm going to leave you that mystery for you. I'm not going to talk about it just yet. They do a good job, really good job with versions, languages, and breadcrumbs and navigations and stuff. I'll show that. They have offline docs. They have PDFs and EPUB, right? Which is awesome. One, if I want to print something, like if you just like reading better on paper, like I do, but I don't actually print it. I struggle through for now. But also, like if you know you're going to be on a plane or you know you're in a low bandwidth place where you can just download it once and not have to wait every time for the docs to come up, or you want to read it on a mobile device or anything like that. Just really nice. Kudos to anybody who does that. I love it. Their doc on what they call legacy databases is weak, and I don't even like the term legacy databases, and we'll go over that in a little bit. And that's it. Right? Those are the main big points. I think let's go to their doc site. Right? I mean, I showed you this, right? Where you can go right to the tutorial. This is when you click get started. You can go right to the tutorial or dive in, install, write your Django app, sharpen your skills. Like they just do a nice job of introducing a whole bunch of concepts, right? And making it really simple and easy right here on one page without taking up the whole page, right? So I don't have to continually scroll. Once I read about what an object relational mapper is, I can close it and open the next one and just go through and understand that stuff, right? And they also ask you to join the community, which is really nice. And it's, look at that inviting message. You can help make us better, right? It's an open and welcoming community. That kind of statement makes me like, oh, I want to be part of them. They're nice. You can help make us better. Like you want me to come interact with you, right? All right. But let's go to let's go to the examples. Let's go to the page. This is a page of beauty. I want to go to this one to start with. This is the documentation site. So I love that they have the Black Lives Matters things up there. I love that you cannot get rid of it. I love it there. And I love their unequivocal statement. They have a search right at the top. Good job. They get you back to all the other parts if you want to. And then let's just go down this page. Like they have first steps. So you're just getting started. First steps. You want to get help? Here's getting help. Oh, but back on the first steps, if you do like one day you do the first 3, you don't have to go back to the beginning of the tutorial and click through to the next 3 to get to where you want. You can just come back here the next day and start with part 4. It's just nice. And they talk about what it is right here. Then they have advanced tutorials. They have ways of getting help. Then they talk about how the document is organized. So right away, they have the 4 different kinds of docs that we talked about in the Postgres one. I'll put the link to the presentations about the 4 different kinds of docs your site should have. But they put it right here and they break it apart. And they've got all 4 types. and they link right to it. It's just, oh my God, it's so nice. And they explain what they are. It's just so nice. All right. And then they start going through the different parts of Django, like the model layer, which is like the model layer in Django is what you do your object relational mapping with. Right. And so that's right there. They give all sorts of nice links to stuff. They cover different kinds of things that developers would be interested in, the basics, then what is a query set, model instances, how to do migrations, what's the advanced stuff. We'll revisit legacy databases, and we'll also revisit this Postgres specific features. Then they go through the view layer, which is kind of how you take data out of the model and get it ready to be and do processing on it to do stuff with it. The template, how you render your HTML or forms, right? They do the whole thing. Then they also, so they have all like that basic, here's the pieces, but then they talk about, here's the development process. Like, how do you actually go about developing an app in Django? They talk about the admin console because Django is a full, it's somewhat of a, I think its beginnings was kind of like a CMS, kind of. It has a whole admin site, and it's built out of the box, right? And so that also gives you security out of the box. But they talk about that. They talk about the security. They talk about internationalization. They talk about performance. They talk about GeoDjango, which is the ability to put maps, for my spatial peeps, into your Django stuff. Then they talk about common other things web app people do, like caching, logging, sending emails, how to handle sessions. Like, it's all just broken out here as you skim over it. Other core functionality like redirects, signals, which is kind of like webhooks, eventing, that kind of stuff. It's just how to handle Unicode, which I hate handling Unicode, but they talk about it because they know how hard it is. And then they talk about the open source project. So it's just it's so nicely done. Now, that's about this page. Then the other part I want to talk about is, notice this is all on the left where people spend most of their time. But quickly on the right, where you can get to it if you need it, is they have this whole browse. So like previous, next, table of contents, general index, Python modules, right? They give you that. They have a nice breadcrumb. So like if we go into the tutorial, right, it'll show that we're actually in the tutorial, but we can go right back up to the documentation if we want to. Really nice. It's right there. They have the getting help, right? And they give all sorts of different ways of getting help. There's the download stuff I talked about. Another getting help here. So no matter where you are on the site, you always have this. This stays anchored there on the right page. They have all the different translations available. So if I was Jorge Morales, I could click on España and I could get all of this in Spanish. The community has gone ahead and translated it, but I am not Jorge Morales, so I must go to English and go back to my, what's somebody who speaks 3 languages? Trilingual. What's somebody who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. What's somebody who speaks 1 language? American. So let's go to documentation versions. You can also, just like the Postgres site, which I liked, you can get all the different documentation versions. If you go to 3.1, which is the current development version, it gives you a nice little warning up here in a bright color. For older releases, use the version selector flag in the bottom right corner page. So not only do they warn you, they also tell you where to go back to the right version. And you can actually even look at the dev doc, which is like the head, right? And so let's go back though now to 3, which is what we're on. So I really love how they put all this nice navigation and help on the right side and leave the left side with the main doc. So it's not just like there might be the feeling, oh, I should put this on the left side, all this stuff over here. But that would take a lot of people's attention away from the main point of coming to this page, which is reading the doc. So really nice use of putting it all on the right side where people can get to it if they want it. But their focus is where it should be, which is on the doc that they came to read. So then in terms of the doc itself, really nice job of putting anchors on almost all the things that you would want to anchor, right? So you can, all these things are anchored so you can go to them. They have nice switching between Linux and Apple versus Windows, how you would run the commands, right? If it's a command line option, and it remembers, right? So if I go to my next page, the rest of the page turns to Windows and the next page becomes Windows as well, right? So really nice. The other nice thing is they do a lot of good job of calling out with bold, using formatting, right? Code call outs. They do the whole notes, right? They do a whole really nice job of formatting throughout the page to draw your attention to things in case you're just skimming the page, right? Really quickly, like, oh yeah, creating the polls app. Oh, projects versus apps. What is that? It just gives you a really nice, it's used throughout their site. They do a really nice job of formatting to call out important things that you want to look at. And they're consistent, which is really nice as well, right? So a lot of really nice doc done by the whole site. Okay, so then let's go back to our examples. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Even if you don't bring the point in, it's still hidden underneath. Interesting. This is a too long of a page, so this is one of my critiques, right? Here's an example. So views, again, like I said, views in Django allow you to take data out of the model, do stuff with it, and get it ready to be presented to the user or save it, right? It's where you process your data. And then you have the ability, Django has a whole bunch of predefined views, so you can actually inherit from those. So that's a class-based view. If you inherit from one of the predefined views, that's a class-based view. And then mix-ins are kind of a plugin to, if you inherit from a class-based view, but you actually want to add another functionality, like say login authentication on a page, you can use a login mix-in, and it'll add that to the view, which requires that someone has to be logged in to get access to that data for the view, right? So they do a nice job at the beginning saying cautious is an advanced topic, a working knowledge of Django class-based views, right? They send you back. Nice. The problem I had with this page is it's actually pretty long and mixes a bunch of different stuff going on. I think that they could have done a better job. Like when I was looking at this page originally, I was like, whoa, my eyes started to glaze over because there's a lot of bolds happening in here. And some of these are links and some are not. And it's not actually clear what's links and what's not. So I would suggest that there's that little red line under that one, but this one doesn't have a red line. Maybe it's because I visited detail view already. Let's see. If I go to single object mix in, does it come back to, no, it's red. Maybe if I go to detail view, maybe I haven't been to detail view yet. Yeah, so when it's red, you've already visited it. I think they could do a better job about making it more obvious that this is a link. Changing the color maybe or something, I don't know. Or putting a solid line underneath. Anyway, but it was also just a lot of text on the page. I think they could have broke this into a bit more separate pages, maybe 1 or 2 pages. And this isn't the only page, this is just an example. Sometimes they have these pages which just are really a lot of text and long and hard to follow along. And so what also happens is though, like if I was interested in this topic down below, there's no table of contents for the page, right? So if I knew I'm reading the using mix-ins and I remember, oh, it's over here on the right. Oh, Steven. So I forgot that. My bad. So it is there. It's just on the right? They do that table of contents. I guess for my Java days, I'm expecting it to be at the top. But this is actually probably better because you don't take up space with it. Just getting used to it. All right. So that's one of my little critiques. Sometimes their pages are too long. Let's see. Legacy databases. So this is actually a much bigger critique, but it's more about how the whole project talks about a certain way of doing development. So legacy databases, I think in the tech world, we think of legacy as something that's old and retired, right? So if I told you I was using a legacy version of Postgres or a legacy version of Java, you would probably think, oh, that's a really old version that's probably not even supported anymore. So what they actually mean by the word legacy here is a pre-existing database or a database that was designed outside of Django. Django, this isn't made clear anywhere in their docs, but in going through it, as Kat and I went through it a bunch, I think it becomes pretty clear that Django expects that you are actually going to create your database in Python. You're going to make the models and then have Django create the tables for you. And that's not a legacy. That's the way they think that you should do things. I think for a lot of us, myself included, I like designing the database first and then putting Django with it, right? So I know I want to design my database to fit my problem domain and then design my app to work with that database. Well, that's not how Django wants things, and the documentation around that is, first, it's not clear. It's how to integrate into legacy databases. I don't consider my database a legacy database, right? It's just a pre-existing database. It's not a legacy database. And then they actually don't have much doc about it, right? They basically tell you how to point Django at your database, reverse engineer it, and make the models.py, right? which is great. But then they just don't like this. Manage equals false is actually pretty big. As I have a whole blog post that came out about it on the Crunchy site. I'll put that in the show notes as well. And they don't really dig into it very much. And then they just say and store the core Django table. So you just basically say migrate, which will then say, oh, I don't have the user table and the roles table and the migrations table. I need to make those as well. So it makes those in your database. And then that's all they say for their doc, test and tweak. Like there's nothing about the development flow or gotchas or how do you work with, like suppose a DBA owns your database. Like you do not have the ability to create tables. Like how are you supposed to do this kind of work? How do you go back and forth? This is a really big missing piece. There might be a book on it somewhere that talks a lot about it, but this is a really big missing piece, I feel like, of their documentation. It misses a key workflow that a lot of people would actually want to know and understand how to do. Oh, I should close Slack in case someone says something embarrassing. All right, Slack's closed. Slack was only open this time because of the whole snafu with going live, not going live. And I was like, Kat, did you see what happened? Anyway, so that's the problem I have with the legacy database stuff. I think the name's wrong, and I think they don't do enough to talk about how to work with them. From what I understand from talking to more Django experts now is basically after you do this migration, do not touch your database underneath the hoods anymore. You basically do all the rest of your work from Django. Otherwise, you're in for a world of pain if you try to do it in both places. It just doesn't work well. That's what I understand. That's what I'm going to go with from now. So I don't think I'm done with all the examples. I think there's one more. Oh yeah, for all of my Postgres peeps, there's a whole page on Django contrib Postgres. So Django, because it has this object relational mapper, much like Hibernate for you Java people, and I'm sure there's something in C# land that does the same stuff, and almost probably every language, if you have an object relational mapper, most object relational mappers are database agnostic in that they can do their object relational mapping to different databases. You just basically say, I'm using this dialect, like I'm using Postgres, or I'm using MySQL, and then it knows how to do the translation to that specific stuff. Well, the Django community is very, very friendly to Postgres. So there's this note here that talks about how they're agnostic, but there's really, really good functionality they can do. Someone could write a contrib MySQL. It's just that no one's actually written it, right? I think is what's happened. So they actually have a whole bunch of really great stuff. And then they call that out here, right? So they call out all the different things that you can do that are specific to Postgres. So, for example, you can do an exclusion constraint. You have the ability when you create that model.py for a table to define an exclusion constraint. And then when you go do the make migrations and then migrate for creating that table, it will actually create the exclusion constraint underneath in Postgres. Same thing with like all these indices. Like you can make all the different kinds of indices that Postgres has. And you can do things like the full text search. You can just use it, right? Like it's right there. And the validators, like they have all these kinds of things that are built in, and creating extensions and things like that. So I think they do a really nice job with calling out the nice things that they can do with Postgres. The one other thing I didn't call, and I was leaving you in suspense until the end, is it's about the tutorial. All right, so if we go to the documentation and begin, they have this whole tutorial, right? So they go through and they talk about stuff. And I forget where the table of contents is for the tutorial. Let's see if so here's the table of contents for the tutorial, right? And they cover a bunch of things. It turns out this is an okay tutorial. What I didn't like is that for most of their form work, they actually use the admin interface to show people how forms work, which isn't, I think, a reusable pattern. And they also don't show how to make a register page. So like I said before, this was kind of like Django does some CMS stuff. And a very typical thing for a site that you build like this is you say register for the site, right? Like you don't want to have the admin go in and create everybody that is ever going to interact with the site. You want to have a register site, and they don't cover that in their tutorial at all. I think that's a pretty basic task, and they don't cover it. The tutorial I'm going to show you doesn't cover it either. I think one of these two places should probably do a tutorial. Kat is in the process of writing a blog post about how we went about making a registration page, cobbling together stuff from the internets. about how to do it. But if it's done by it won't be done by then. But maybe I'll go back in time and update it. But anyway, the better tutorial in my mind is the Mozilla one. So I keep forgetting that Mozilla has this whole developer network where they have a lot of nice docs about the web, right? And you would think, oh, they have HTML and CSS. Yeah, but they also have server-side programming. And they have a whole tutorial on Django. And I found this to be the better tutorial about Django because while they do cover the admin site and making admin forms, they actually cover more on like working with normal forms and sessions and user authentication and permissions and right. Those are the kinds of things that most people usually do when they're writing a web app, especially a HTML server-side generated web app. And it's just really nice that they cover it all here in the tutorial, which the Django one does not. So I would recommend looking at the Django tutorial on the Mozilla Developer Network as a better tutorial. And it's actually a really good tutorial overall. Whoever wrote this, they don't tell who their authors are. Kudos to you from the Mozilla Developer Network. I'll put this link to the show notes, but they did a really nice job on that one. And then there's also one for Node on Express, if you want to use Express. So with that, I think we are done. I will go back to the points again. Bloop, bloop. Despite the little bit of criticisms I have, those are all minor compared to how awesome the Django site is as a developer site. So if you're looking for a role model, this is the one to have. Pretty good tutorial. I already covered some of that stuff just last thing. I showed on the bottom right how they do a good job with version, languages, and breadcrumbs. Really that whole right-hand side, A, putting it on the right side, not on the top, but on the right side, and B, all the stuff they cover in there, really nice. Notice some of the stuff they could put there is because of the goodness of their community, though. Like the IRC channel. Like there are people in the IRC channel, therefore I can link to an IRC channel. So this goes back to the Kickass curve stuff I said in the very first documentation, which is a well-designed product or a nice community can cover a lot that the documentation site cannot. So that's one of those advantages there. Again, downloadable docs. I love those. Their doc on what they call legacy databases, which I think is a misnomer, is weak. And that's about it. So I hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully it really recorded this time. Let's get rid of my desktop. We'll go to the me. And I had fun doing it the second time. Went a bit smoother. Funny how that works. I'm out of developer sites to review because I'm not doing much new APIs or anything that I'm playing with right now. If I would love suggestions, if you have them, send them my way. I think I do a nice job of being balanced. I'm not overly critical of anyone. So please send suggestions. You can put them in the comments here or in the show chat. I don't even know if anybody's chatting with me. I should take a look. Okay, so there's someone there. And then I should... So send suggestions. Maybe I'll put up a Twitter poll too. You can send them, also tweet it at me. At my Twitter handle is TheSteve0 because I'm leet like that. 0 instead of an O. And then... what else? Oh, and tomorrow, not Friday, because Friday is when the U.S. Celebrates July 4th. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking with Martin Davis about PG Feature Serve. So that'll be another one where I do an interactive session. So tomorrow, a little bit later in the day at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Other than that, I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I will catch you later.